There we go. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another Dragonfly Cafe. Joining me today is Dr. Ursula Valdez, founder and director of the Center of Education, Science, and Conservation in Peru, and also works in collaboration with Hacienda Herrera. Dr. Valdez is a faculty at the University of Washington, as well as the main instructor of the Amazon Earth Expedition course, Avian and Tropical Ecology. I'll hand it over to Dr. Valdez, but before she starts, if you come with any questions as she's speaking, feel free to put them in the chat, and then we will have a Q&A at the end where she'll answer all of your burning questions.
Great. Well, thank you. And thanks everyone for being here this evening. It's still a little bit afternoon for me. I'm talking from Seattle, but let's start. So my plan is to tell you a little story. So this is not going to be really much about research. It's going to be more like a story of different components. But before I do that, I want to acknowledge that I'm in Seattle, and I want to acknowledge that I occupy ancestral lands of the Coast Salish people, especially the Duwamish people. But I also want to acknowledge the Eseja people in Peru, in Madre de Dios, Peru. And we honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish and the Eseja people in Madre de Dios. And we respect them, we'll listen, we learn from them. And that's what I want to start with. And then I have to also start by, I'm talking and presenting today about some of the work that we do in Madre de Dios, but obviously this is not just me. This is the collective effort of many people, including some people here, who have been part of a partnership with SECOT. But also, I want to in particular acknowledge Ruth Torres and Kenny Herrera and their kid, Tiago, who have been really important in developing the work that we do in Peru. And as well as my colleagues and students, and now are my colleagues, Dan Frolic, Noé Huaraca, Cristobal Sanchez, and as well as some other collaborators that have been helping me to develop, that we were working together to develop programs and training training programs and conservation programs. So Ross Furbush, Cusi Seminario, Manuel Monteagudo, Garrett Sheets, and Romina Najarro, and many more. But let's go to a place in Peru. So here are, I'm going to take you there tonight. So we're going to Madre de Dios in southeastern Peruvian Amazon. And in particular, we're going to go here, very close to Puerto Maldonado, pretty much Puerto Maldonado, and just a few kilometers away from Bolivia and Brazil. And just to give you a sense of where we are talking about, this is Amazonian rainforest, tropical rainforest, with a mosaic of different kind of habitats that go from riparian to old forest to primary forest. And it's also a really interesting ecosystem called the aguajales, or palm swamps, and a combination of other primary and secondary habitats in here. So you probably are familiar with some images, and especially some of you who have been in Peru are familiar with what this area can offer. And I'm going to just give you a little bit of some iconic species of mammals that we can find in there. And actually all these pictures have been taken by us in Madre de Dios. So we have a Amazonian tapir, giant river otters, capybaras, and ronsocos, and check it out here, kind of with a bird on top of it, a giant cowbird, and a couple of jaguars. This is not the best picture, but it's pretty exciting to see a couple of jaguars by the river. Some other iconic bird species that you may be curious about this area, that in many cases, and with many of students, we've seen them. Harp eagles, this is my favorite spectacle owl that we hear. Actually, harp eagles are harder to see. We've seen it in the area, but they're much harder to see. But the spectacle owls, we hear them all the time, and we don't see them much. We've seen them sometimes, but we hear them, which are pretty fun. Hoatzins, a really interesting bird in the area, very old in terms of the lineage is really old, really interesting bird. Manakins, another of the kind of common species in the area. This is another, I'm kind of showing you my favorite pretty much. And then there's agami herons, which we've been lucky to see them every time, almost every time that we are in Madre de Dios. In general, this area, it's incredibly rich in biodiversity. So if you can see here, some of the this coloration are depicting some of the gradients for biodiversity in the area of the Andes and the Amazon of Peru. And you can see for mammals, birds, and amphibians, you can see this gradient from blue to red in terms of high diversity. If I've put my map or the location of where we are, we definitely have like a high concentration of species in Madre de Dios. Unfortunately, though, one of the things that despite that there's all this biodiversity, and that for a long time, it was one of the areas that it was probably one of the most preserved areas of the Amazon in actually the entire region, the entire basin. Unfortunately, not only the Peruvian Amazon, but also the entire basin is highly endangered. Year after year, we have reports of how much habitat is being lost. So this is one of the latest reports from the MAP project that it's telling us that in 2021, about 2 million hectares, which is about almost 5 million acres of primary forest, has been lost in the entire region of the Amazon. 9 countries that are part of the basin. They attribute that based on the information that they analyzed to 78% that associated to deforestation, either for different activities, agriculture, cattle ranching, illegal logging, mining, and 22% to fire, which is something very that's been increasing in recent years. Brazil obviously is the country with the highest percentage of deforestation for that period of time, from 2021. And you can see a little bit in this graphs the trends that has been for the primary forest loss due to deforestation and fire for like a couple of decades, and also for the Peruvian Amazon. So significantly changes and significant impacts that are happening in the area. I don't have enough time. I could be talking forever about this whole topic, but I highly encourage that you look at the trends and deforestation and the causes behind that, and then many of the things that we can do as a community. We are far, for many of us, I've seen some people who actually are seeing this from Madre de Dios. They know what I'm talking about. But for many of us who are far away, it may not be as easy to picture this, but it's a serious problem. In particular, in Madre de Dios, there is a huge issue related to habitat loss and degradations of habitat due to gold mining extraction. The activity has intensified. It's been there for decades, but it has intensified in the expansion of areas that have been destroyed by gold mining. And one of the things that it's just this picture by Walter Boost, a colleague of mine I know him from college. These 2 pictures show a change of the level of destruction that gold mining can have in the area. However, the point is that gold mining is a very complex issue. Again, I could talk about it, and with people who come and join us in Peru, we discuss a lot about gold mining while we are there. It's a really important issue in a way that, yes, it's destroying habitat. Like, look at this landscape in the left-hand side. It looks nothing like rainforest that at some point was covered with forests. It's a really one of the most prominent economical activities in the region. It's people who depend on that. So it's a very complex issue. But the other thing that it brings is that it actually gets a lot of connections with not only environmental issues, but health issues and social and economical implications, because as I mentioned, it's a extractive activity that's providing the income for many poor people who have no other option. But at the same time, the way the practice that is done is through mercury pollution. And we know that mercury has a lot of issues with health, not only for obviously biodiversity, but also with humans, not to mention the other things that are associated, like human exploitation, illegal operations, conflicts with conservation, plus a big corruption network in there. So pretty significant and very complex issues in the region. So people are faced with obviously low incomes and situations in which they need to find resources. So it's kind of a hard situation. I personally arrived in Madrid. Oh, and then I'm going to probably depress you a little bit more. Not to mention that the Amazon is there's a lot of models and simulations that are looking at the data, looking at the climate data, looking at the precipitation data. And there is a possibility that by 2050, the rainforest is going to be actually more like a network of savannas and forest. So that's something else that it's changes that are happening in the area. So people depends on resources, wildlife, biodiversity depends on the conservation of this area. There's something that we can do or not. A lot of people get depressed, and that's not enough. And then we start talking about, okay, how do we decrease deforestation? How feasible is that? Are we going to be just putting more? I mean, laws are in Peru, they're established, they're not enforced. I told you there's a little bit of, not a little bit, unfortunately, like corruption networks. So there's a lot of things that in the conversation of conservationists, it's been there. There's some solutions, and we know that that's what we should do, but actually it's not as easy to do, to take it in action. So fortunately, though, there are more and more people working. And the time that I arrived in Madre de Dios for the first time was 2005, and it was a different situation to what it is today. The problems haven't intensified in certain way, but also the amount of people and the amount of effort to work into like alternatives, sustainable solutions has increased also, which is a fantastic thing. So by the time that we arrived there, I was with some colleagues of mine doing research on birds. And we were very impacted by, at that time already, a level of destruction of the forest. So we decided that we wanted to kind of find a way to contribute in some practical way. So we're researchers and we're educators. So we talk with people, we thought about it, and a lot of information also tell us that one important thing is for people to know, to learn, to be aware of the situation. And in particular in 2005, we found a lot of young people that they were, whenever we talk with those young people, they were always in search of opportunities. They needed to leave town, or they needed to get into activities that were associated to gold mining because they didn't have opportunities. So we decided that we were going to work in some sort of first an evaluation of the situation, and then start thinking about educational strategies. So with more people and with more ideas, we decided to work with young people to give them opportunities to learn about the forest. And something that is really interesting is at that time in that area, people will talk about the forest, but a lot of the locals will not know much about the forest. Many of the people living in Madre de Dios are descendants of Andean people with completely different perspectives of what the Amazon rainforest is. So there was a lot of, at that time, a lot of disconnected relationships to actually the forest. So we start by doing something that we knew to do. What's first, we were interested in birds, we were studying birds, so we decided to assess a little bit on the impacts of this habitat, and then do some education associated to that. So we created the Centro de Educación, Ciencia y Conservación Tambopata, which is a COD, or the Tambopata Center for Education, Science, and Conservation, with the goals of definitely research and monitor changes in bird populations, but through that, provide training and education for people in the area in particular. This Madre de Dios has been known for tourism, and there was a lot of opportunities for tourists from some other places, from Lima, other cities, or from abroad, but there are not as many opportunities for the actual local people to learn, to leave town and then learn about the habitats that were just behind them, around them. And then also the opportunity was to explore in talking about sustainable living. There's a lot of traditional practices that they're being lost. So they're trying to recover some of those traditional practices, and also try to work with what are alternatives for sustainable living. And all of that through using birds. So we established a long-term monitoring program with, again, the idea to monitor the birds and learn about the communities of birds in relationship to all these habitat changes. But at the same time, that was our way to train future generations of bird researchers to continue the work. And in particular, it was very important for me because I was a Peruvian who was trained and given the opportunity to do more research, to do more things, to learn, to explore. I wanted to also kind of give it back and provide the opportunity to other people, younger people. So we started with that, and we have for that we've been collecting data over like several years now, using standard methodologies that are used in many places of the world, and using a model for the program of the bird populations in the United States, that it could be comparable, and it could be a standard monitoring, that it could provide an opportunity to learn about birds and be training people. So we were actually one of the very first organizations that provide field courses in ornithology and banding and monitoring for students, not as a research institution, but for students in general and the public. And we incorporated standard methods as well as opportunistic methods, and then trying to evaluate all the different areas within the area surroundings of Puerto Maldonado, near areas that have influenced by humans. So one of the things that I want to kind of back up a little bit in here is that we partner with local families who own land nearby the city. So then we establish a study site that way. And just to give you a little sense of how, some kind of cool species, again, I'm not going to tell you much about the research per se, but I'll share some of the natural history of the species that are really fun to learn about. And this is one of the ones that are my favorites, the band-tailed manakin. But just in general, just to give you a sense that over the years, we've been able to record or register 380 species in the area of our work. Almost half of the species that are recorded for the whole region. We look at species of primary forest and secondary forest. And within the species that we found, that's approximately, we actually are switching a little bit of this because we have a little bit changes in the migratory species, but 85% of residents and 55% are migratory, which is also very interesting. Migratory species that are coming from North America, and also austral species, austral migrants, boreal and austral migrants. So migrants that are coming from South America. And so just interesting things too that our data has helped us to figure out. And also obviously comparing this with the studies in other places in the area. We have band-tailed manakins in our location. We have found 2 lakes. Lakes are really interesting places. This is a species of bird that has a really striking coloration in the males. The females are not like that. And the males are, they associate in these places that are called lakes, where they actually can do a lot of the displays to attract females. And these places are very predictable and they're consistent. So there's group of males who are in the area. And we have found 2 of those areas within our study site. So just some general things about the species. These are frugivores. They eat a lot of fruits. There's a really interesting information about their sexual selections. As I mentioned, the males are very colorful, and it seems that that's something that it has a huge influence on the being selected by the females. So the most colorful, the females must found something really important about the most colorful males that only a few of them are chosen. As I mentioned, females and males and females are very different. And based on our records from our studies, we found them breeding, especially in June, July. We have not seen other evidence of reproduction at other times of the year. Then we have Amazonian marmots in the area, very, very common in both primary and secondary forests. And these species are the ones that were kind of like the most common and that we see them all the time. Omnivores, they eat everything pretty much, arthropods, lizards, and frogs. They nest on the ground. They make little kind of mud cavities and or in the small cavities, tunnels. They could be in the ground or could be in branches that are decomposing or logs that are decomposing. And we found them reproducing in late March in here. And those are very easy to hear, to recognize by the sound, even that it's a very striking coloration. These birds are very quiet when they don't move much, but in the morning and the afternoon, they do a lot of calls, and that's when you can find them. And this is the really cool species that it's really interesting also that in the area where we're working, we're seeing a combination. It's the area where we work, it's mostly modified forest. It's not primary forest, but we're starting to find a lot of species that in other places will be found only in primary forest. So we're getting more records of those species. And there is all these ideas about that. Birds, this species of birds use primary and secondary forest, or maybe because forest has been destroyed, they've been kind of finding less quality or less viable habitat, and they don't have any option where to go. So maybe secondary habitats are a possibility to survive. We don't know yet, but that's a possibility. These birds are really interesting in which they're very territorial, but they have small territories, and they nest on plants that are colonized by ants that are very aggressive. So there is this interesting relationship between a plant and the species of ants that they live in that particular plant. And nobody goes into these trees because the ants are very aggressive, but these birds nest in there. So that's another really interesting relationships to try to find, and who knows? So we need more people to come and help us with the research in there. Then this is another really interesting species that is part of a group of the antbirds. So you probably have heard about antbirds. Antbirds do not eat ants, but the way that the whole reason of what they're called antbirds is because they follow ants. They follow ants that are pretty good at hunting. So there's this ants on the army ants. You probably have heard about them. Army ants move in the forest in like kind of different stages of being nomadic and stationary for a few days. And they do this raids and they eat everything that it moves. And these birds depend on that activity to catch the prey that the ants are flashing. And there's some ant followers that are obligates and others are facultative. So the obligates are exclusively rely on the presence of the ants. And the facultative, they can join the ants sometimes, other times they don't need it. In this particular case, the black spotted bear eye, it's a antbird that it requires ants to survive. So it's monitoring a lot of army ants that they are going to be taking them to the food. One of the really interesting things is that for a long time, it was thought that army ants were all much more restricted to much more primary forests, but now we're seeing that that's not the case. And I know there's some other ant specialists doing that they actually are distributed also in secondary habitats. So these birds that it was thought that they were only in primary forests, they're actually in many more forests, in forest types, including secondary forests and modified forest. And this is one of the other thing that we're looking is at the seasonality. And some birds are way more abundant in certain times of the year in our site. And this is one of them, the smallest of the kingfishers in the Americas. This is the pygmy kingfisher. And we find them, it's associated to water bodies, of course. And we thought that it was just in the small lakes and ponds. And actually what is really cool is that we find those birds in the middle of the forest during the rainy season. And they are using small little ponds that are formed during the rainy season. So we're being banding them. So that's something else that we do with the birds. We band them so then when we can see a little bit of some trends of recapturing them and see if they're just using a small territories pretty much, or small areas where they're feeding. So they are the species that they get more in the forest than other species of kingfishers, which is really interesting. So anyway, just a little example of what we've been finding. And we still have a lot of work to do, a lot of work, a lot of data to process that we haven't done enough. That's an hour. We have to speed up on that. But we also are trying to look at not only at the species and the natural history, but we're also trying to see a little bit about the communities and the community ecology. What kind of what you can have in primary or secondary habitats, you can have a number of species, but are there from the different ecological groups? Are there, what proportion of those are predators? What proportion of them are eating fruits? And this is more or less what we're finding, like this forests that are modified in the surroundings of our study site are mostly dominated by insectivores and frugivores, which is pretty consistent with like tropical forests in many other places, including primary habitats. Anyway, there is plenty that we have to study about the birds. And that's the part of the research. We're expanding this into other paths and also with mammals and hopefully with more insects and plants. But the other thing that it has been really good for us in our work is that having the opportunity to use the forest to learn about plants and animals and insects and birds, it has given us the opportunity to open that to more people in Puerto Maldonado, which was another of our goals. So since 2007 that we created, established SECOD and then officially Friends of SECOD in 2008, we have used the forest as the main place for learning, for activities of learning, outdoor education, research, yes, but then what's the benefit of research for education? So we have the Bosque Escuela, pretty much is the, our project in which we have involved kids of local schools from the very beginning, showing them what we're doing first, so they can see that what the researchers are doing, but also opening the forest for them to experience hands-on and learn in the forest, like many of us have done it. The other thing that has been really important is that we've been able to involve more local students in our activities, training them into the techniques, and then also entering data, monitoring the programs, and also leading the programs. We start kind of leaving our, my colleagues that at the beginning were kind of managing everything little by little. We can now leave in the hands of people who are much better trained. We've been able to establish a partnership with a family, which I'm going to mention that next. And then we have opened the place to also open opportunities for students from all over the world, including the Earth expeditions and the Project Dragonfly, to come and work with us while we're doing research, pretty much, and learning in the forest. So the forest school is open to many more people. Through these programs in education and training, we have actually accomplished something that it was pretty important from the beginning. That was those young people that we found years ago that they were looking for opportunities. Now they have improved skills and they have opportunities. And in here, in this picture, all of this that are next to me, like more than a decade ago, they all work in Madre de Dios, they have jobs, they have followed in the same path of either birds or sustainable living or research. And they are now actually turning it into leaders and trainers. So that's been a really important thing for us. And one thing that, again, has been a really important aspect of continuing the work, and this is actually Kevin is a witness of the beginning of this, is that at the beginning we're partnered with a local family, but this family needed to sell their land and we couldn't afford buying the land. And then I have this couple of students, Ruth and Kenny at that time, who start coming as volunteer students and start participating in all the training programs. They both study ecotourism at the local university. Then it happened they were dating, they got married, and in the meantime, they were very consistent in the participation in all the different activities that we were trying to do in the area. And little by little, since some of us, we couldn't be there year round, we'll start delegating some of the managing of the research and monitoring the education programs to Ruth and Kenny. In particular, Ruth has a very important role in the leadership of this. They got married, and it happened that their family has been, and these are Kenny's parents, so this is the Familia Herrera. They own land, and they've been pioneers of conservation for a long time, decades of work in which they have used the forest for production of some crops, but they do it in a way that is not massive and monoculture. They're maintaining the forest. Vilma, who's the mother, has been a very important, like, she has had a key role in some of the activities in the local area as for sustainable use of resources. In this case, this is Peru nut, not Brazil nut, Peru nut. It's a very important sustainable product from the forest, that it doesn't require cutting the forest. And she has created a cooperative. So there was this family who was established in the area, this young couple who just got married, and these parents gave me the opportunity to say, well, what can you do with this? We have some land, we make it produce a little bit, but we also want to protect it. And they both decided to partner with us, and together we formed what it was the partnership called Hacienda Herrera. And through the help of the revenues that we could get from some training programs for people from other places of the world, donations, and the work of Ruth and Kenny, we've been able to have proper facilities. So we have now a field station that works as a field station, but also as an eco-lodge. The eco-lodge is the portion that Kenny and Ruth have developed themselves as a business for their own life. So we have now, a very well set up for cabins that it served both as for tourists who come here or for students who come in courses. And our most recent, and I'm so proud to introduce this, I haven't shared pictures of this. Kevin, you haven't seen this. This is the Casa Tamandua. This is our multi-purpose new building that it was possible to do. Again, as a partnership of SACOT, creating funds through donations and programs, part of the money that students from Project Dragonfly pay to stay here, that goes to pay this. And we have this multi-purpose building that now, these are Dragonfly students from last year doing discussions. This is the top floor that is a multi-purpose, that it works both for workshops, classes, when they're tourists, it's a dining hall, just a multiple room, and it's a really, it has improved a lot of our facilities, but we don't plan to expand much more. That's kind of the level that we want to do. So one of the things I'm really proud of, this kind of relationship that is started from my students being trainees to become managers, to become their whole, they could control. First, they were working the skills that they gained with us in the training, help them to find jobs, and then they actually took some of the philosophy of our work with like us thinking about scientific approaches and sustainable living. They took it to the companies that they work, but then they were able to create their own. So now they have their own business. They have the Hacienda Herrera Eco Lodge, but they also work coordinating the activities of SECOD inside. And the other thing that is really great, they can start training others. And then obviously they have focus on ecotourism, but a sustainable alternative. They do offer some of the services to us, to the groups of people that SECOD brings to the hacienda, but they also participate in other activities on their own. And then the other thing that is really important is that we have also, because of Ruth and Kenny's connection with the local communities, especially the SEJAs, we've been able to incorporate them in our work too. So that's been a really, and just by the way, this is a visit to Lago Sandoval, which is a pretty important tourist destination in there, where you can see actually giant river otters and babies. This year with the students, we had an incredible sight. From land, we could see the family of giant river otters coming to us pretty much. It was just so magical. And some other activities that they're doing in the area. The other thing is that because the land in which we are now, it's a farm with very low impact and also very focused on agroforestry. We could actually harvest a lot of the food from the area. We don't need to source from other places, and that's something that has been a philosophy from the very beginning. That I work in conservation. I teach about conservation. I've been talking, my colleagues and I have been talking about ecological footprint and all those things related to the diets for like almost 20 years. We kind of brought that philosophy, and at the same time, not only brought it actually, is that with the help of the ancestral thoughts and the ancestral practices, we could recover this, because it's actually nothing new. We're just recovering what it was done in the past. And if we talk about a little bit about why the rainforest is destroyed, is because in part it's a lot of cattle ranching that has been done in the past and continues it, and agriculture. So beef and soy products are one of the main culprits of disappearing of the rainforest. And so we don't serve beef or soy in our center. And the food is just mostly vegetarian with a low ecological footprint. But just kind of have you a little sense, if you're being attracted to good food, you're going to find it in here. I have to tell you a very quick personal thing. I love bananas, but I don't eat much bananas in the US. I can't for the principle, and then second, they just don't taste at all the way that they taste when I'm in the morning, getting up really early to go in the field and start the work on the bird, opening mist nets and so on. And then I could grab a banana that I pull from the bunch that is being hung for a few days, that it was picked up like just a few meters away. Nothing tastes like a banana. Nothing tastes like a banana like that bananas. And we have bananas and plantains and many more in there. So if you're interested in good food, come to SECOD and Hacienda Herrera. So one of the things, I also want to kind of come back a little bit to the student training in a way that having an established place has also given us the opportunity to incorporate more aspects to our training. Not only we've done the training, but also we have partnered with organizations such as Dragonfly in Miami University, that now we have, at this point, we have had, I think, say 10 years. I'm like kind of now, I don't know how many years, but we've been able to bring students from college through other courses and from master's programs. And every year, Miami University and the Project Dragonfly takes at least 18 students. So it's been at least a decade, if I have to say. And adult and young students. And what is really great, I don't know if you see most of the times pictures of birders, pictures of people in ornithology. Usually there are a lot of men. Nothing against men. I love men, and there's some of my colleagues in here. But one of the things that has been really incredible is that we've been able to attract more and more women. And that has come from the very beginning. And we put a lot of effort on training women, but also attracting more young girls, more young kids to develop the opportunity to, regardless of gender, just being able to explore and express their plain desires, the curiosity, and all those things that in many cases that is very we've observed in one of the things that we've done that I haven't mentioned enough is that with the programs, while we're doing training programs for adults or for younger students, and college students, we always invite a school of kids to see and come what we're doing. And in many cases, we've seen sometimes that girls are shyer than boys, and it's just because they're sometimes being given that role, and they are not. They just need to have the opportunity. So we've represented with given the opportunity to empower people from different underrepresented groups of society, regardless of their origin, gender, roles, and everything. More and more, I love this picture of Ruth. This is something that I just love, is that she has the power. She has the power in many of those things. And she's very inspiring. She's inspiring many other women also in the local area. So we have more people in there. One, I'm just going to get in here. Our main project, as I mentioned, that we're trying to develop, we started very like loosely and kind of slightly informal, but it was always this idea that the forest is our school, now outdoor school. So the Bosque Escuela, and we started this outdoor education for children, but we have make it a little much more structured. And especially that has been really important, the participation of the Project Dragonfly into getting the expertise of educators, expertise of people, and then they're willing to share that expertise and our experiences with local teachers, with local students who are willing to also share their own. So we are working on developing that a little bit more and having more kids enjoying learning outside, either if it's about birds or if it's about any other topics. So another really important thing, as I mentioned, I really want to emphasize the participation of some of our partners, and in this case, Dragonfly in the Miami University has been really important to actually get something established much more formally, which has given an opportunity to train Ruth and train more people in the roles of not all, at the beginning they were just students that were sharing information or sharing the experience. Now they have key roles. Into here is Noe. I don't know if you remember Noe. Some of you will. Noe was a student. Now he's one of the most talented and skilled ornithologists. He doesn't have a formal training in ornithology per se. He went to school and got a degree in ecotourism, but he is like a really skillful and very knowledgeable. And on top of that, he's an artist. We have students who have come from Dragonfly. I have to recognize my colleague Elizabeth Katua. We've been working with her she started as a student and now we work together in this program, and it's just fantastic. The quality of work that she brings, the attitude, and then just how she's kind of fit a perfect role in this partnership too. And many students with their engagement, they engage with Peruvian students. That's another great thing that this program allows us to get Peruvian students who can participate in the activities with the students from the program. And we can also, engage local communities. We visit other people, not only from us. So that's really great. And this is what I was just trying to say, that, it's great to share all this with people who come to the Amazon and learn, and then probably the experience could have been very impactful for them. But sometimes they go back to the US and then, that's it. This is a case of, you probably remember Susanna Steiner, and she may be in the audience. I'm not sure, I cannot see. But Susanna took a class a few years ago, and she got inspired by many things. She's incredibly, driven. She was very excited about everything, and she's learned a lot about how to, not only about natural history and the things that the class was required, but the other thing that it was really great is that she was so curious about how to replicate this leadership program in something that she was passionate about. And she lives in Alaska. She spends a large part of the time in Alaska, and she's very passionate about marine mammals. And she used that experience in her IAP project, was based on beluga whales. And she ended up starting a nonprofit in Alaska, near Anchorage, south of Anchorage. And she's done the whole kind of similar approach of doing research, doing outreach, training students, and getting some volunteers. And this year, I was so happy and honored that I was a volunteer in September in her field research. And she was my boss, she was my trainer, and we did my husband and I actually had an incredible time learning about beluga whales inside from someone who's been trained in Project Dragonfly. And just for the fun of you, to have fun with, first of all, I'm incredibly proud of this achievement, and also this connection. You wouldn't imagine that any experience in the Amazon could influence her working here. But just for you to have fun, here I'm watching for belugas. This is in Cooking Lit, and I know it's a small picture. I should have made it a little bit bigger, but we were watching that day. We saw 27 belugas passing by. And I was doing office hours to Project Dragonfly students at that time. So actually and I don't remember, I think it may have been Kelly, and I'm not sure it was Marshall, but I talked with some people and we were doing office hours while I was watching belugas in Alaska and talking about projects that were inspired with the class in Peru. So I just feel like, it's all this sets of connections. And then maybe sometimes I get too excited that I kind of lose my track, and I probably got you a little bit dizzy with all this stuff. But this is just such an incredible opportunity to influence people in the local place, in the sites, but also all over the place. So thanks, Suzanne. This was a fantastic experience, and thanks to all of you. And then just to end, to say that we're not only trying, we're very interested in monitoring birds. This is Bat Falcon, that is actually David Olson took one of the classes recently with us, a different class that we provide. We are increasing the number of people who now come to our place because they want to see birds. And then also we're just finding a lot of other really interesting things like mammals that I never expected to see even in the primary forest where I spend a lot of time. We have a whole system of camera traps that actually students who come and work with us, they're monitoring, and we have incorporated little pieces of all these projects actually in our courses, including the Project Dragonfly. So this is just growing and growing little by little at a slow pace, low profile, but we're pretty happy to this. If you have heard, I'm not going to talk much about this, it's just to give you a sneak peek of this, is that if you have heard about bird-friendly coffee, right? There's a lot of really interesting studies about that. We're trying to do a cacao and bananas friendly or bird-friendly cacaos and banana study because we're evaluating the differences between plots that are being cacao that is grown in an agroforestry system compared to cacao which is the majority, cacao chocolate, grown in a monoculture large extension of habitat that a lot of places actually they're cutting forests to plant chocolate, which is not ideal again. So we're trying to see if we can find some interesting things. So that's in the process. And we can also incorporate some of the activities of the research in the activities that promotes the production or the family has a small business on cacao that they do a very small scale. So we can actually do this food production that is responsible with a science behind it, that it could be something that's beneficial both for the family and for us because we're maintaining forests in the area. All right, so with that, I just wanted to thank, this is the group in Peru, the family plus other people that work with us. And many of you know them. Thank you to all of them because they're very crucial in this. And if you want to get involved, volunteer, you're welcome to come and join us. We have training programs that we offer through SECOD. We're going to advertise soon for the 2023. You can take a class of Project Dragonfly, take the program. You can support our work. You can check for us in Facebook. And thank you, all of you, to listen to this, and to all the people, the family, Peruvian and international volunteers, our partners, and the birds and the forests. Thank you. And with that, I will leave space. Hopefully I didn't go too late. So I'll take questions.
Yeah, thank you so much. Feel free to unmute and give Dr. Valdez a big round of applause. She did great. Thank you so much.
Great job.
And many of you guys who are here, I can see some of your names. You're being part of this. You've been part of this. So thank to all of you.
Yeah. We did get a couple of questions in the chat. I'm happy to read them. So Glenn asked, how much support do you get from the local government? Do you find that there's a positive response? Is there interest from the local government in your research?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a couple of things here. So there is support in the people are very encouraging of this. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of funding. That it comes from, all of our funding comes from either volunteers, some of the training programs. We get some of that money to support the research and the students. We don't have much that way. But the good thing is that there are more and more initiatives that the government is supportive, at least in action, not necessarily funds. But the network also of people who are working has increased, which is also great. Many of them are part of our people that we train. Others are just people who are having similar efforts and interests. So it's growing that way. But yeah, funding is always a problem.
All right. So another question from Kelly was, I'd love to hear more about how you initially built the relationships with the original owners of the hacienda.
Yeah, so I think I mentioned briefly. So Kenny and Ruth were students who somehow heard or followed one of the volunteers who was coming to our training programs. And they wanted to see what was going on, and they follow people, and then they talk with us, and they start coming as volunteers. And as I mentioned, Ruth and Kenny were very whenever another program will come, they will show up again. And then little by little, their involvement is starting being much more significant. And then we are not a big group of people. We're not a big organization. We're actually very small. And one of the ways that it could continue is because, two of us live in the US. We go there, but we're not there all the time. And Ruth and Kenny, they start showing this kind of much more significant interest. And then Ruth in particular was starting to take the leadership into organizing other volunteers, or whenever we were going to have a program, she would be helping a little bit more on the logistics. So little by little, we created this structure with her that it was very important for us to maintain that relationship. And then when they got married and the family kind of made, find they were married, and that makes it something, okay, you're working, what can you do with the land? And then we were at the process in which we're trying to figure out, okay, the other people that we were partnering with sold the land, we couldn't work with them, we couldn't pay them. So we were thinking, where do we move that is impactful and we can do something, we can continue our courses? And Kenny would say, well, we have this land, I wonder if we could do something. And actually it was Kevin, Elizabeth, and I that we went to check it out. And there was a house and there was some, kind of facilities that we could work out something, a little bit of camping and thing. And they said, well, maybe the next year we can come here. And we have a little bit of funding from our organization. We did fundraisers in the US and all, and we were able to build a couple of dorms where the students could come. And that was the beginning. And then little by little, those dorms could work as rooms for the lodge. And one thing, year after year, we've been adding one thing after another. And it's been very beneficial for both us to have a local partner and a place, and for them to have us as the source of students, training programs and all. So we made this, this alliance is like so strong. And now it's also very personal. I mean, they're like my family, and they run a lot of things that now I'm kind of, just, we kind of let them do more things on their own. And now they have their own, they left the jobs that they had before, and now this is their job. And this is their own thing. So that just, if it sounds like the perfect story, it's kind of like the perfect story with a lot of difficulties in there. But because it's not easy, it's been really hard for them, especially, during the pandemic. And we are not an organization who is, generating tons of money or anything like that. So we do a little by little, but it's been working that way. Yeah.
Thank you. Another question in the chat from Montserrat says, how important has the study of the conduct of birds been to create conservation strategies?
Yeah. So there's been a couple of things. So first is like, we're also very fortunate that it's a family who has a philosophy that they want to protect the land. So that was something clear, and that has been the family and the mother Vilma and Pepe, that they don't want it to destroy the land. They always wanted to keep at least some. They used it some, but then they wanted to use that. So that having an interest of them, and then we can use that as a kind of a habitat that is not going to be modified for our studies, then gives also the possibility that we can bring more people there to help us in the research and to help, and then to also train them. And obviously, by using facilities, by being able to build that station eco lodge in the place, that is a much more higher incentive to keep the land, because that attracts now lots of people. I don't know if you can check it out. Look for Centro de Educación, Ciencia y Conservación Tambopata in Ebert. It's a popular place, and people come to see birds. And we have, again, more than 300 species, and some of those species, that you wouldn't expect to find them in there. I mean, you can wait at the beach and the river, we're by the river, we can in the afternoon, and you can see an Amazonian umbrella bird passing through. And that's something really special. There are people who will pay lots of money or just want to come for 2 or 3 days to find those birds. So birding has been a very big, not only the birding activity, but also the documentation and the research that is coming, that is attracting the right type of tourists who want to have that experience. It looks beautiful and it's comfortable, and some of you who haven't been there, it's like big upgrade to what we have before, but it's not luxurious. I mean, it's super nice, but it's not luxurious. It's not built to kind of, to satisfy the desires of luxury for people who want to go to the Amazon and have air conditioning and all this. That's not that, but it has attracted people who cares about conservation, and we are attracting more and more. And even sometimes people don't know, but by having the experience and all these components are kind of being impressed with what we've done. And again, this at this point, it just has a lot of credit for I had to give credit to Kenny and Ruth, who have really known how to move ahead with the skills that are gaining. I mean, we contribute and we discuss ideas, but now it's mainly their work. In terms of the operation for business. Yeah. We bring the research and the conservation philosophy, and that has been our contribution and the training.
Great. And I think we have 2 final questions before we wrap it up, but who uses the data that you collect?
Yeah, so we are at the process that we're trying to kind of gather data we hope to publish this data. So we are not making it completely available to everybody, but yes, there is some portions of the data in terms of we do write an eBird, for example, which is something that is public, that records of a species, numbers, things like that. Our data is related to population and breeding and all that. We're hoping that to get a little bit more, sometimes 5 or 6 or even 10 years of data, and kind of having a good picture is not necessarily enough. But we can just make it available for people at a one-on-one basis, depending on the interest that they have. But records and what species we're finding, what's the abundance of those species that's available to the public. Yeah.
Perfect. And then I've been asking this question to all of our speakers, but in 1 to 2 sentences, what is the key thing that you want everybody to get out of this talk?
Okay, well, that's kind of
a hard question. I know that.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's that, I mean, this may sound cliche, but it's just make the connections with the right people. And then those connections, when they are rich and when they are honest, and then when they are respectful of like what everybody is bringing into this, it's so important. I mean, I'm Peruvian, but I'm not from Madre de Dios. I had some skills, but I didn't go. I mean, I wanted to put them to the service, but there's so much I can learn from the people that I'm working with. So it's kind of coming to this. First of all, we need each other to be successful in research, be successful in conservation, be successful in life. We cannot do things alone. That's one thing. Second is like, coming to this, being honest, being with your heart, with your skills, and you just will find the right people. And I think that's for me is that, yeah, that's what it makes, life follow that, you want to do research, you want to do ecotourism. When you are honest in your intentions, when you bring your heart and your hands to this partnerships, then you're going to be having a good experience. And that could be with, my partners from Peru within there. And that's something important for me because I always want to be so connected with Peru. I live in the US, but I want to be, I found many ways in which I can be still connected with Peru. I would never like to lose that. But also, again, open your hands and your skills to other people like all of you. And many of you are part of it. So we can do it together. That's, to me, I don't know, maybe that's too much to say, but or too idealistic, but that's how I feel it.
No, I think it's a great answer. And I think it is true. There's a lot of good things about creating those connections and collaborating with people and learning from each other. We all bring different skill sets to the table.
Right.
All right, so to wrap it up, I just want to kind of say a few words. So thanks again so much, Dr. Valdez. We really appreciate you coming and speaking about it. I also want to note that this talk is hosted by Project Dragonfly and the student group Project Diversify. In the chat, I have included a few links. If you wanted to be part of the Project Diversify, you can fill out the form. You can also request to be in the Facebook group. And if you think of anybody who would be a great speaker for these series, you can also suggest them in the very last link there. There's a form where you can kind of propose someone. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and
so I left my email. I know there are some questions that probably we couldn't go, but I left my email. If you want to kind of reach out, feel free, and I'm happy to just answer more questions. Thank you all for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, that is wonderful.